Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Please put your headphones on and get ready for the session. I see a few people without headphones. If you could put those on for me. Thank you so much. Some people are still sat. If you could put your headphones on for me, that would be great. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the final Women in Data session here at Big Data London. And what a treat we have in store. We have our unwavering partner, J-Man, who will be delivering a fireside discussion focused on business, tech, implementation, and will be bringing it to life with real-work application and examples. Help me welcome our speakers. We have Caro Ames, a principal at J-Man, and Anush Newman, the CEO and co-founder of J-Man.
Can everyone hear us? Okay, great, very good. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it's slightly graveyard shifts, last penultimate session of the second day, so we'll try and keep it upbeat and high. So I'm Anush, I'm one of the founders of J-Man. We are known for being commercial data partners to the private equity industry, so we supply a range of strategy, analytics, engineering services. But at our heart, we are software engineers who solve commercial problems. So my background's a consultant. My cousin, who's my co-founder, is a software engineer. Worked in Silicon Valley in the 90s. So we very much stumbled into data. We didn't know what we were doing, and a broken spreadsheet is what catalyzed our journey into big data as it was a few years ago, and then all the services that we provide today. So with all the changes in AI and just the proliferation of data and the demand for data, especially industries we work in, it's been a fascinating time over the last 5 years. We are about 460 people now, spread over London, Chennai, and New York. And given the industry that we work in private equity, we see a lot of high growth businesses that are under real pressure to deliver value from data. So I think part of what we'll talk about today is where we've seen it work well, where we've seen it not so well, and also then the ongoing challenges that these companies face.
Great, thanks Anush, and thank you again everyone for being here. So my name is Caro Ames, and I am a principal at J-Man Group. I co-lead our Global AI Center of Excellence. My background originally was actually in engineering of the infrastructure type, not the data type. But I actually came into data because I felt like there had to be new and different ways of solving some of the problems that I was seeing in industry. I've been in AI consulting for about as long as you can have been. It's about 8 years. Previously at a company called Faculty, one of the UK's leading applied AI machine learning companies, as well as the last 3.5 years before J-Man on the global data and AI leadership team at a company called Arup, who are a big infrastructure and sustainability consultancy. So my kind of main focus really is around how do we build the internal and also client-facing capability to drive change through AI, given the kind of rapidly evolving market that we are seeing. So I think Anush kind of talked a little bit around what we're going to talk about today, but I think to start off, it would be really interesting to hear from you, Anush, what you're seeing in the market, some of the key changes that you've seen over the last year, and particularly in terms of how people are thinking about implementing data and AI capability to drive better decisions.
Yeah. So I think, the last year is quite an interesting time frame. I'd say even the last 5 years ago, data or big data driven value was still quite a new thing for a lot of companies. Money was cheap, growth was high, I'm making a lot of money anyway, why should I do anything different? And that has changed a lot in itself as times have got tougher, we need more information for decisions. I'd say then obviously generative AI 2 years ago sparked a wave of panic in a lot of clients, a lot of investors, and their investors. So private equity funds have separate investors, there's pension funds and so on. So all of them were just going, is this an opportunity? Is it a threat? What the hell do we do? And I think in the last year in particular, the big change has been, we've tried some stuff and we've got burnt, and we still don't know what we should be doing. And obviously times are still tough for these businesses. So I think that against that backdrop, there's been quite a lot of change. And I think 3 main things that we see with companies that are doing it well and those who aren't doing it well. So the number one thing, again, these companies are not public companies, they're not enormous, but they're still varying sizes. If the CEO or the head of the unit doesn't buy in and doesn't drive it, it's probably not going to work. So I think, again, it's fairly obvious, but actually there are a lot of people making investments into AI C-suite, AI teams, tech teams. But if they don't have the teeth of the CEO, the person who drives strategy, is ultimately accountable for delivering value, it just doesn't work. You end up with a lot of silos, a lot of issues, and a lack of real cross-business sort of collaboration. So I'd say that's definitely one. Two is this: we need value now. This is not while especially in AI, it's a long-term revolution. We need value today. We're in private equity, especially. We're on the clock. We've got a short cycle. Everyone's talking about value. We've tried stuff before; it hasn't worked. We need value. We need value today. And I think the big thing is the underestimation of the amount of effort it takes to make this work and where to start. This is not pick a use case, do something, and go. It requires a lot of effort from everyone across an organization. So the ones who do it well kind of at least try to tick those 3 boxes, but the ones who where it's not working, it tends to be the lack of buy-in from the top, which drives issues.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me it's quite interesting. So up until when I joined J-Man, a lot of my clients were either very large companies or also public sector. And the kind of religious focus on value for PE to actually help make things happen and drive change and actually like effective implementation is something that's been very exciting for me working in this space. I think more broadly as well, this kind of effort piece, we've got to think beyond the tech. I think this is the whole point of today's discussion, right? But the scale of effort, it's not just about the scale of effort required to build something or to implement something. It's the scale of effort required around kind of like people and process change to actually drive the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And I think what's interesting as well is that that's the bit that, one, people often forget. Two, it's often the hardest sell. So we work in a services organization, right? And that is always the bit where clients want to start to begin to kind of cut in terms of the spending that they're doing. But ultimately, it is also the bit that drives the value and the impact that you're doing, because you can implement the greatest tech solution in the world, right? But if nobody wants to use it, trusts it, or can't use it, then it doesn't deliver any impact. And I think that that also goes beyond, as Anush was saying, in terms of C-suite, CEO buy-in for driving kind of data and AI-led change. There's this absolute need to kind of really think about this as a cross-business transformation program. So yes, you need to deliver value fast and early and iterate, and a lot of that comes through use case implementation, but there's also this need to step back and think about the bigger picture as well around how can you do this scalably. It costs money to implement data and AI, right? We all know that. And so how can you do it in a way that's scalable, but also build the foundational capability within your organizations that actually means that this will be successful in the long term? Because fine, you might upskill a group of people who are getting a specific tool to make specific decisions, but ultimately for this to be scalable, you need to be thinking about how do you build foundational skills within the organization, whether that's data and AI, literacy, or also governance as well, because there's also a lot of risks associated with this. And how do you put the processes and the structures in place around the organization to make sure that this is scalable but also robust in the long term?
Yeah, 100%. I think as I mentioned the word panic, there's still a lot of that knocking around, and I think also we are a service provider, but I'd say again where the use of service providers, external service providers, is not done judiciously. It's a bit of a panic and bring them in, and we see a lot of PowerPoints knocking around still. So we see a lot of AI strategy, AI assessment, AI PowerPoints, some of which we produce, but to be fair, but kind of but there's a lot of that, and then where do we go? Where do we go next? So that's why it has to come from the top. It has to come from the person or the people who are trying to. Where is the business trying to go? What is it we need to do in the next year? And going back from there. And I think if you have too many cooks, it can be quite a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's the other part as well, is ensuring when you get the kind of CEO level drive for this, also ensuring, therefore, what you're doing aligns with the broader business strategy. I've seen so many data and AI strategies in my life that have no association with the business strategy. And ultimately, if you're going to try and drive better decisions through tech, you need to be able to, first of all, quantify what those better decisions are and the value that you're delivering. But that also, that value needs to equate to what you're trying to do as a business, right? Like, you're not, I would love to do this just for fun, but ultimately, we work in a kind of like capitalist society, right? And we need to be driving business outcomes. And so I think that CEO, alignment and the kind of business strategy level alignment is something that I hadn't really seen until probably the last year. I feel like, I've been in this space for quite some time. And I think what I was seeing historically was a lot of individual teams deciding to implement individual tools or capabilities without it necessarily being thought of strategically and like prioritized. And what that happened and what ended up happening regularly is you get this graveyard of proof of concepts, right? That never actually go anywhere and don't actually drive decisions. And it was because they weren't getting this kind of like strategic support. It wasn't being, the effort wasn't being focused necessarily in the right place. And ultimately, the thinking wasn't being put down to turn this into a scalable capability, which is really what's needed in order for like the business impact to actually happen.
Yeah. Caro, you mentioned decision making and kind of effective decision making. With the shift towards agentic AI now, and actually agents making decisions for businesses, how does that fit into this? What should people be thinking about?
I think this is quite interesting, right? Because ultimately, historically, in terms of like AI, we've been building tools, we always say actionable insights or make better decisions. And as AI is evolving, I will say agentic AI is like really at the start of its journey, right? So right now, there is capability out there, you can't implement it, but we're only going to see it grow. And I think one of the things that people really do need to think about and actually remember is, as much as we want to talk about the like people and process aspect of implementing kind of traditional analytics or AI tools, when we think about building agentic AI capability, we've got to treat it in the same way, right? So a really like good example, and you've almost got to treat it like a person that is going to be using data and insights to make decisions, right? Like that is literally the whole point of an agent. It's like cognitive ability to kind of make decisions off data, right? And so I think that kind of almost like mirroring of how you then think about designing and implementing these solutions, thinking still around, treat it like a person, think about the processes. So one thing that we've done recently in a really successful project with one of our kind of big clients, which has been really exciting, was around like what does an agentic AI strategy look like? And ultimately, actually, the major amount of work that went into this project was actually around like process mapping, understanding the business, working with users, and then designing future state processes that interact with these agents, but also making sure that it was done in the same way that you would do a traditional workflow map, right? And I think that is really important because the other side of this as well is as we become increasingly more tech-enabled, as we increasingly rely on potentially less transparent or kind of less interpretable insights from data and tech, right? We really do then, first of all, need to understand what's been implemented, right? So that people can trust it. But it's not just about trust, it's so you implement something that actually drives the outcomes that you want, and you're also not creating huge amounts of risk. Because the other side of what I see, and particularly when people start talking to me about AI or agentic AI, is like how much can we automate? How much efficiency can we drive through automation, et cetera, et cetera. But people often see tech as this like silver bullet, right? Which is like, it's going to solve my problem. The number of times I have people coming to me being like, can AI solve this problem? And I'm talking to them about their problem. And I'm like, guys, this is a little bit of process engineering, maybe a Power BI dashboard. It is not AI, right? And people leaning too heavily on tech and actually not really thinking about like the people aspects around it is a big risk that I see, right? Particularly just, given the level of maturity that many organizations have.
Yeah. And the maturity point is a good one. I think for this company that we were working for, it's a buy and build. It's based in the US. I think they've bought 15 or so businesses and tried to unsuccessfully stitch them together. So one of the reasons they've been able to try and go on this journey now is, I think about a year ago, they couldn't actually count their customers. They had no idea, how many customers they have, what's their revenue. We're trying to do cross-sell between Where does it come from? So one of the, obviously it could be anyone else, but it's actually, can you count your customers? How do you do it? As you buy new entities, how do you make sure that you can integrate them? So nothing to do with AI, actually some pretty, I'd say, old-fashioned kind of probably data structures. By the time, we're quite cognizant, by the time you build something, it's probably out of date anyway. But they own this, real basic foundation, which has meant that actually they could progress quite quickly into this. And it feels very real. I think that's the thing, it feels very real. We now have the foundation, we now know what we're going to try and do, and we can actually go and get some real value out of this very quickly. And I think the different types of stakeholders involved in that have been incredible. It's not a tech team, it's not just the business, it's a real mix. So,
and I think those different stakeholders, right? Like coming back to the point that we keep talking about around like people to like really drive this change. Historically, and this is actually a big change that I have seen over the last year, is people were thinking about tech teams or data teams or AI teams or analytics teams very much kind of in siloed capability, often sitting in an IT function or underneath a CDO. And they were often just like building things, not talking to the business, right? But when we talk about making effective decisions or better decisions through tech, it needs to be the people in the business who are making these decisions, right? So you need to be implementing this tech with the people in the business and also planning your roadmap based on your understanding of the people of the business. And so, one of the things that makes me very excited about like AI in particular is I think it's really driving this kind of, obviously we talk a lot about data mesh at the moment, but this kind of cross-functional proliferation through the business, which reduces these silos, and I think ultimately in the long term is the most important thing for this technology to actually have real business impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Just show of hands, if we can. I don't know, obviously I'm sure we've got a lot of mixture of people in the room, but if you are either a service provider or not working in industry, if you work with or your organization has a CDO, put your hand up. So a small minority, I'm sure some of you are CDOs, but we see, I think it's ironic, especially in high growth, fast growing businesses, the minute a CDO gets hired by a relatively non-technical team, it's a big red flag for us, because it ends up basically almost an admission by the business. Yes, we need to do something with data and AI, but I don't want that to be my problem. So I'm going to hire someone, put them there, and I think kind of again, there's lots of ways that this can go. It can absolutely go right. There's lots of ways it can go wrong. And I think this is kind of where we, as I said, having a dedicated team who do this can work incredibly well, but only if there's real buy-in from the top. And there's acknowledgement of maturity of the business as well. Where are we? How quick can we actually go? What can we go after? But I think we're amazed how many people don't actually ask that question. We'll spend all our money on a CDO, but no infrastructure support, no team. Just one person, go do it all. So I'm sure you guys have never seen that, but we see it
all the time,
daily.
And it is interesting. I think that coming back to this like buy-in point, what also happens sometimes when we see this kind of hiring of a CDO or a very siloed function, kind of implementing and building capability, is that, and this comes back to my point earlier as well around aligning to the business strategy, but there's no way to measure the value or the impact of what you're doing quite often when it's hyper-technically focused. And ultimately, how therefore do you know if you're actually making effective decisions and if tech is enabling you to make effective decisions and if you're actually driving the change that you want within the organization? And one of the reasons that it's so important from my perspective for these teams to be like multidisciplinary and like working together is, as part of this implementation, we've really got to understand what value we're trying to drive the business, right? Like what is the so what? So what is the actionable insights that we're trying to get from implementing this capability? And also how are we going to measure the impact of what we're delivering? Because, this is the other side as well. I've seen so many organizations, throw millions of pounds at building data and AI capability where no one has implemented anything to think about measuring impact. And you get 1 or 2 years down the line and the board or the C-suite are going, well, where did all that money go and what have you done with it? and no one can articulate it, and that's when you also lose the buy-in from C-suite, right? And it's also, you need it, it's not a one-off investment, it's continuous investment, it's continuous transformation and change, and that requires a clear business case, and particularly in private equity, where there is such focus on delivering value, you need to be really clear on that.
Yeah, and I think the other dimension to this is, what are you actually measuring, and is it right? And with that, we know a law firm who's been implementing a lot of AI, and obviously it's going to revolutionize the industry and change how their junior associates work in the future. And someone who we have a lot of respect for said, the tools are working fine, it's just helping my team do shit work a bit quicker. They're not actually, if you were measuring it based on outcomes of the quality of the work and AIs, you'd say it's a complete fail, his view. It's just that it is, the way it's been implemented, the way people are using it, it's helping, it's making stuff quicker, but the actual quality of the work hasn't got any better. So why is that? But all that will get filtered up, and they're really worried about this because all that gets filtered up is we spent millions on AI, doesn't really work, hasn't had the impact that we're trying to get. So I think this point around what are you measuring, there's still this little bit of it's going to be a silver bullet, it's going to make huge changes. It needs to be very, very carefully thought through.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that measurement point, again, so okay, their junior people are doing things quicker. What else are they doing with their time, right? So I do not love the idea of AI driving efficiencies and thus people cutting headcount, and it's something I try to avoid massively because I think it's not the right way to think about it. I think it needs to be thought about as a bit of it's an enabler, right? But then what that means is if you're implementing it in this context, you've got to be thinking, okay, what else are these junior people doing? How are they adding value to the business? And it might not be directly attributable to the tool that they're using, but the actual outcome could be there. It's just, you've got to be really clear on what that is.
100%, and this is why, again, if you're a smart junior in a law firm or a consulting firm, and it's a big AI push, you're probably thinking, right, someone's after my job. So why would I buy in? Why would I think we see it, McKinsey announced they're cutting their workforce because it's being driven by AI, and they're not alone, others are doing the same. So how do you if you think it can have a real impact, actually I can scale my workforce. It's not about cutting, I can actually get them to do a hell of a lot more by using these tools. And again, I'm speaking to someone who's very, been a partner in a consulting firm for over 30 years. They said, we had very similar discussions when Excel first came out, kind of, in the sort of 80s and 90s. They said, well, I'm here for my maths, I'm really good at counting. If this computer does it for me, then I'm out of a job. And I think that's not just what we measure, how we measure, the cross-functional isn't just how we're going to implement it, but who's buying in, who's it going to help, how's it solving pain? It doesn't actually take that long to think about these things, but these questions just don't get asked a lot of the time, and that's what leads to problems.
Yeah, and I think it's just about asking the question. As you said, it's often not a huge amount of effort, but if you're thinking about it, then ultimately you're going to do it. And I think this comes back to it's not just about the tech, right? People often hyper-focus so much on the tech implementation part that they forget to ask these questions, and ultimately that's when it fails.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, then we've got 6 minutes left.
6 minutes left, okay. I think, Anush, if you wanted people in this room to take kind of 3 things away as really kind of important, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think the buy-in, you need, C-suite. It's not even C-suite. It is the person, where does the buck stop for the business? They're the ones who have to be driving this. Whether, again, it's not just about, we talk about AI, but it's not just about AI, whether it's the foundational data piece, it's kind of what are we actually trying to do, acknowledgement of where we are as business, maturity-wise, that's one. It has to come from the very top. How you then structure it and, who executes and how they help, that's, that can vary business to business, but whoever is going to go and do the doing, they have to know that they've got teeth. They've got the teeth from to go and make sure everyone plays ball. I'd say that the tech is not quite incidental. Of course, it's incredibly important, and you must think about what's right for the business and what's the right structure and how to scale it. But again, by the time you've built something, it's probably already out of date. So, it's, I'm sure a lot of would disagree, but it's a little bit tail wagging dog. So I think kind of, what are you actually trying to solve for right now? And I think with that is the focus on value. What does value mean for your business? Is it actually, we're growing really quickly, so how can we do more with what we have? Is it, no, we're leaking, so we need to be a bit more efficient? Is it we're trying to develop new products, so actually how can this help us do that, faster and faster? But what does value mean to you? So I think buy-in, value, and don't underestimate the effort it requires across the business to change this. You're only as strong as your weakest link, and if someone in business doesn't buy into it or doesn't think it's good, you're going to have trouble. So those would be my 3.
I think I completely agree. So it's almost like we planned this. Look, everyone, we wanted to give a massive thank you. Unfortunately, because this is a headphone stage, we can't do questions, but I will be down at the Women in Data stage after the talk. And look, please come and speak to us. Feel free to reach out, ask us questions, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you to our fabulous presenters. And like Caro said, they'll be heading downstairs. If you have any questions, please do let them know. Thank you so much, everyone.